On her 35th birthday, Daria didn't fall from pain. She fell from understanding. Her husband hit her in front of everyone, and she laughed. They thought she was broken, but they didn't know the truth. Hello, dear listeners. Before we begin, please leave a like and tell me which country you're listening from. It really helps and motivates me to create more stories. Thank you. The morning over Rublevo-Uspenskoe Highway moved slowly, like thick honey. Light filtered through the heavy French curtains, casting a dusty rose glow. It was Irina Valerievna's personal taste. Daria lay with her eyes open, listening to water running in the bathroom. 35 years old. A strange age. Not young anymore, but not old enough to excuse everything as fatigue. The bathroom door opened. Alexey stepped out, a towel around his hips. He still looked fit, like a model on a magazine cover. Water dripped from his tan skin, but his face was empty, like a phone that had died. Happy birthday, he said flatly, leaning over to kiss her cheek, quick, mechanical, like a waiter handing over the bill. Daria smiled. She had learned to smile in a way that hid everything. Mom is really excited for tonight, she thought. He was already pulling up his underwear, without looking at her. Don't fail me, don't fail me. She felt like a hired actress who might forget her lines. Of course, she said calmly. Alexey nodded and went to the dressing room. Daria leaned back on the pillow, staring at the ornate ceiling. The monograms and rosettes were another one of Irina Valerievna's touches to this noble nest. This is not just a story, she thought, speaking to an invisible reader, a witness, a judge. This is an expose. You're about to see how empires fall. Her phone vibrated. Her mother-in-law's name flashed on the screen like a storm warning. Irina Valerievna, good morning, Daria said warmly, her voice smooth from years of court practice. Dashenka, sunshine, happy birthday, her mother-in-law chirped like a socialite in high spirits. Everything is ready for tonight. Catering from Turandot. Flowers from Vlasta Chetshova. You'll wear that blue Valentina dress. Lyosha loves you in it. Of course, Daria lied. Thank you so much for organizing everything. Oh, my dear, anything for you. Lyosha is happy, the mother-in-law replied. Daria looked at her husband. He was buttoning his cufflinks, frowning. Great. Sunshine until the evening, said the mother-in-law, and the call ended. Alexey turned to her. What are you doing today? I'm preparing documents for the Sochi real estate deal, she said. He nodded absent-mindedly. Before, he would have joked, teased, or asked details about the project. Now, he was just playing a role, like an extra in a crowd scene. She remembered mornings when he brought coffee to bed, kissed her shoulder, invited her to stay another half hour. Now there was a gap between them the width of a king-size bed. I'm leaving, he said, straightening his tie. See you in the evening. A kiss on the forehead. The door closed. Daria waited until his footsteps faded, until the elevator took him down to the Bentley. Only then did she rise and go to the dressing room, the only place in the apartment without cameras. She had found them 3 months ago, during a deep cleaning. Tiny cameras, installed during the European-style renovation that Irina Valerievna had insisted on paying for, watched everything. I want the children to be beautiful, the mother-in-law had declared, even though they didn't have children and probably never would. Daria left the cameras in place, but now showed them a perfect picture, a puppet show of false smiles and rehearsed gestures. Behind a panel in the carpentry cabinet, hidden among shoe boxes, was her real secret stash. She moved the board and took out the contents. 3 external hard drives, a spare Lenovo laptop, a pack of SIM cards, 2 cheap Nokia phones, and a folder of printouts, materials collected over 4 years of marriage. She sat on the ottoman and opened the laptop. Inside were organized folders, finances, correspondence, notes. Mironov. Daria Michailova-Egorova, 35, lawyer by training, graduated from Moscow State University with honors, co-founder of the New Horizon Charity Foundation, wife of the heir to a construction empire, participant in social events and expert panels. In reality, she was a strategist, building a case against the entire Igorov family. It had started simply. She had helped her husband with documents. He was never good with numbers. And she noticed strange things. Transfers to offshore accounts, tricky tax schemes, fake contracts. At first, she thought it was normal, everyone did it. But she dug deeper. Then Alexey started changing. After every evening at his mother's, he came back more distant, withdrawn, almost rewritten line by line. Daria had experience. She had worked for 3 years at Papiliev Group, defending major companies in financial fraud cases. She knew the signs, what lies looked like on paper, how pressure sounded in conversations, how big money smelled when it passed through a dozen shell companies. The last straw was a video from Alexey's cousin. Her husband flinched at the name Mironov. Who was Mironov? Daria started investigating. She connected a cheap phone, copied new files to a flash drive, screenshots of transfers to Cyprus and Dubai, $2.5 billion over the past year, audio recordings of Irina talking to lawyers, files on behavior control, psychological manipulation, complete dependence, PDFs with instructions for their judges, with names, amounts, and schemes. The last file was a photo from the night before. Victoria, Irina Valerievna's youngest daughter, sitting at Beluga restaurant in Moscow City, across from a man in his 50s, gray at the temples, in an expensive suit, Dr. Mironov. According to the documents, the child psychologist was secretly being paid $2 million a month through a company registered to a distant Igorov niece. The clock showed 7:15. It was time to become Daria again. Model wife, successful lawyer, family pride. She hid her secret stash, picked a strict dark blue suit from Chipirin. Today was a hearing at Moscow Arbitration Court for Grant Prescott versus Mashinstroy. Routine contractor dispute, but the client paid well. By noon, she'd finish, return, change, and become the perfect best girl again. In front of the mirror, Daria practiced her expressions, warm gratitude for the surprise, genuine delight at the gifts, tenderness for her husband, respectful love for her mother-in-law. The bedroom door opened. Alexey returned, forgetting his briefcase. "You look brand new today," he said, eyes scanning her. The Brioni suit fit perfectly, but his gaze remained empty. Daria noticed the details: narrow pupils, tight jaw, tense expression, side effects she didn't yet understand. "You're not bad either," she smiled, straightening his tie. For a second, a spark of the old Alexey appeared, then vanished. "See you in the evening," he repeated and left. Her phone beeped. Daria's phone buzzed. SMS from Irina Valerievna. "Dashenka, where is your blue dress from Valentine? Lisha adores you in it." Daria typed back, already ironing, and climbed into the closet for a burgundy Dior dress, the color of ripe cherries, of blood, a quiet protest that only she would notice. In the taxi to court, Daria split herself in two again. On the outside, she was the perfect picture. A successful woman, makeup done by Bobby Brown, Saline bag in hand. On the inside, she was a strategist preparing a strike against the empire. Her phone vibrated again. Messages on Telegram from a consultant contact. Materials received, the mechanism launched. She typed back, "Today will be the last piece of the puzzle." Then she deleted the messages, turned off the phone, and hid it in a secret pocket of her bag. The car slowed in front of the courthouse. Daria straightened her shoulders, put on her professional mask. Meanwhile, back in the mansion on Rublevo-Uspenskoe, Irina Valerievna was busy with the final touches, unaware she was about to set the stage for her own public disgrace. The elevator in Tsargrad lifted them quietly, expensive mechanics moving silently, like a conspiracy. Daria stood between her husband and the mirrored wall, studying her reflection. The burgundy Dior hugged her body like a second skin. She had chosen the color of war perfectly. Alexey checked his watch for the third time in 2 minutes. A gift from his mother for her 30th birthday, Pak Philippoi. He stared into space, silent. The door slid open, sunlight hitting his eyes. Candelabras, gilding, orchids taller than a man, a harp in the corner, like a fairy tale about a dead princess. It's all a show, thought Daria. Decorations for society's elite, who would witness the execution today. Dashenka, Irina Valerievna, floated toward them in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and fake joy. Ivory dress, 3 strands of pearls, the smile of a politician before elections. Hugs, a kiss on the cheek, and a jab. You'd be better off in blue for the photo, darling. I wanted to surprise everyone, Daria said, looking her mother-in-law straight in the eyes. The first move was made. Irina Valerievna froze for a second, then laughed loudly, dramatically. Well, surprises are wonderful. Let's go. Everyone's already gathered. She took Daria by the arm and led her through the crowd, like a director showing who was in charge. Daria nodded to familiar faces, smiled, counted quietly to herself. Not a single ally, not one from her professional circle. All her own people couldn't make it. A coincidence, of course. Happy birthday, sister, she thought. Artyom appeared from behind, holding a glass of sparkling wine. Once almost family, now a risky liaison. Daria took the glass, noticing how his fingers turned white on the stem. Good evening, he said neutrally. A lot of interesting people. She followed his gaze. Pavel Mironov stood by the window, the family psychotherapist. Gray temples, expensive suit, university professor manners. Officially a stress consultant for top managers, unofficially a specialist in psychological manipulation with a shady reputation. Yes, very interesting, Daria agreed. Artyom squeezed her elbow as a warning and disappeared into the crowd. Mironov was talking to Victoria, Irina Valerievna's youngest daughter. Daria edged closer, hiding behind a waiter with a tray of canapés. The deadline was pressing. Victoria's voice reached Mironov. Lyosha's psychological instability is becoming a problem. Control has been tightened. Everything will be ready by the 15th, he replied. The 15th. Daria knew this date. It was the deadline for re-registering the trust fund. Hundreds of millions of dollars tied to Alexey's signature. The plan had to work today. Victoria turned her head. Daria barely had time to step back. They noticed her. Instant mask change. Daria, the birthday girl. Mironov smiled. Let me congratulate you. He extended his hand. Damp palm, weak handshake. His voice cracked slightly. Thank you, Pavel Sergeyevich, Daria said. Victoria watched him like a surgeon checking the first incision. A wonderful evening, she said. Mom tried so hard. Yes, everything is great. A pause. Mironov coughed, apologized, and went to the bar. Victoria stared at Daria for a moment longer, then turned away. Alexey wandered between the tables like a lost actor. He stopped at groups of guests, repeated polite greetings, laughed at jokes he didn't get. His gaze was empty, his smile strained, as if glued on. Daria watched from afar. Twice he turned to check who she was talking to. He took out his phone and dialed someone, not like a husband checking on his wife, but like an agent reporting to a boss. Daria Mikhailovna, glad to see you, he said later. Judge Pashin, a heavy-set man with the face of a kind Santa Claus, was an old friend of Igorov's. He had made the right decisions in arbitration several times. Yes, Viktor Semyonovich, a wonderful evening. Irina Valerievna knows how to organize parties. Very intimate. Pashin narrowed his eyes and lowered his voice. She asked for a chamber format, only the closest. Chamber, under control. A chill ran down Daria's spine. She looked around. No lawyer friends, no independent witnesses. The trap was nearly closed. Ladies and gentlemen, please come to the table, said the master of ceremonies, a young man with the manners of a butler. The table was sterile, like an operating room. Crystal, silver, orchids in low vases. Daria found her card. The seating was deliberate. Alexey to her right, Irina Valerievna at the head, Mironov directly opposite. Perfect for observation.
Guests sat down.
Waiters carried the first course, oysters on icy cushions. Dead flesh in mother-of-pearl shells. Irina Valerievna stood, her crystal glass catching the candlestick light. Dear friends, today is a special day. Our beloved Dushenka is turning 35. She has become a true treasure of our family, smart, beautiful, successful, and most importantly, devoted to Igorov family values. She paused, looking around. Loyalty, discipline, dedication, This is what makes us strong. This is what Daria shows every day. Let this year be a turning point for you, darling. Turning point sounded like a sentence to Daria. Guests applauded sluggishly. She raised her glass and sipped flat champagne. After the second course, Irina Valerievna approached Daria, hands on her shoulders, a motherly pose for the cameras. Her fingers dug in like a vice. There will be an important announcement after dessert, she whispered. Smile. You look wonderful on camera. The perfume was heavy, suffocating. Moss and something rotten. That's exactly what power smells like, Daria thought. Alexey started drumming his fingers on the glass. Tick, tick, tick. Daria recognized the gesture, a programmed trigger from sessions with his mother he never talked about. Irina clapped. Waiters rolled out a table, a marble slab on gilded legs, piled high with boxes. Guests pulled out phones, recording everything, forming a semicircle like a jury on a reality show. Alexey took Daria's arm, leading her to the altar of gifts. His hand was icy, movements mechanical. The first box, Tiffany's turquoise signature. Inside, a platinum bracelet studded with diamonds. Daria held it to the light. A beautiful handcuff, she said. Someone giggled nervously. Irina Valerievna smiled wider. Lyosha, put it on your beauty, she said. Alexey obeyed, snapping the cold metal onto Daria's wrist. Applause, camera flashes, film rolling. After all the gifts, the Cartier watch, emerald earrings, and a Maldives trip certificate, Irina Valerievna gave a slight nod to Mironov. Alexey stood abruptly, as if pulled by invisible strings. I have a gift too, Alexey said loudly. Too loud. The hall froze. Daria felt everything inside her tighten into a knot. It had begun. Irina Valerievna stepped forward and placed her hand on her son's shoulder. Her fingers landed precisely, a practiced gesture, a signal of control. Daria had studied this in her reports. Physical anchors, methods of control. Ardashenka is the pride of the family, Irina began, addressing the hall. The perfect partner for my son for these 5 years. 5 again, Daria thought. The number emphasized like a warning. Irina leaned toward Alexey and whispered, but Daria could hear clearly. Remember who you are. Protect what's yours. Daria quietly took out her phone and started the voice recorder. The final minutes of the performance had to be captured. Alexey turned to her. Something alien flashed in his eyes. Not pain, not anger, learned emotion. You betrayed us, he said, voice trembling. A hum ran through the hall. Someone dropped a fork. You leaked information to the Financial Monitoring Service. You collected dirt on the family and kept an eye on us. Guests gasped. One woman clutched her chest and sank into a chair. A waiter rushed with water. Irina Valerievna looked like a grieving mother, her way to take control. The accusation came first. Now, anything Daria said would seem like an excuse. Lisha, Daria began. The blow came fast and sweeping. Alexey's palm struck her cheek. Her head jerked sideways. Daria flew back, grabbed the edge of the serving table. Her lips split. Blood filled her mouth, the metallic taste warning of what was to come. Silence. Only champagne dripped slowly from the table, like a metronome. 1, 2, 3. Irina Valerievna stepped forward to regain control, but Daria started laughing. At first quiet, like a cough. Then louder. Laughter rolled through the hall, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers, hitting the frozen guests. This was not the hysterical laughter of a beaten woman. It was rebellion. Daria rose slowly, holding the table. The burgundy dress straightened, a banner over the battlefield. Blood from her split lip glistened in the candlelight. You couldn't have staged a better performance, she said, scanning the audience. Even if you'd hired a director from the Moscow Art Theater. Everyone froze like wax figures. Alexey, help her, Irina Valerievna ordered. He didn't move. He just stared at his palm, the one that had struck Daria, as if seeing it for the first time. Confused like a child who doesn't understand why there's blood on his toy. Daria wiped her lips, looked at the blood, and grinned. You've just witnessed a psycho program in action, she told the room. Congratulations. Not everyone sees how mind control techniques work. She waved her phone. Everything is recorded. Every word, every gesture. Copies have already been sent. If anything happens to me in the next 5, 10, or 60 minutes, the Project Novaya Gazeta, the investigative committee, and a few State Duma opposition deputies will get the archive. They are waiting. A rustle went through the hall. Guests reached for their phones. Screens lit up. Calls, messages, notifications. Lord, someone whispered. The oligarch's daughter-in-law is accusing the family of psychological abuse. It's online. Video evidence is public. The FSB will check the Igorov Holdings funding, another voice added. Irina Valerievna stood frozen, like a pillar of salt. For the first time in Daria's life, there was no calculation, no cold superiority on her mother-in-law's face. Only fear. Pure animal fear. Daria lifted the phone like a microphone, her voice calm and measured, the voice of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. For the record, Alexey Igorov's trust fund required 5 years of perfect marriage to gain control over the assets. Perfect, Daria said, pausing to look around at the silent guests. But public violence, what you all just saw, cancels the legal basis of the marriage contract. Article 69 of the Family Code. If anyone wants, it's all recorded. Everything, in front of witnesses. This evening became the point of no return. You set all this up, Irina Valerievna hissed, her mask of maternal care finally falling away. Daria shook her head. I only recorded what you created. Alexey, your program in a human body. A robot of flesh and blood. She turned to the waiter. Turn on the projector, the one in the corner. The young man hesitated, glancing at Irina Valerievna. She said nothing. Turn it on, Daria repeated. Or should I call your director and tell him how Tsargrad is involved in money laundering through catering? The waiter rushed to the equipment. The screen unfolded and lit up. Here are the documents, tables, diagrams, financial flows through offshore companies to Cyprus, Daria explained. Maplewood Holdings is registered to a nominee director. And here are the transfers to Dubai, Desert Rose Investments. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Click. New slide. Behavioral suppression scripts. Impact protocols. All signed by Dr. Mironov. Daria turned to the psychotherapist. He stepped back, pressing against a column. Pavel Sergeyevich. Daria's voice rang like steel. You remember Alexey at 13, right? Remember how you trained him to have the right reactions? It was a therapeutic approach within the family framework, Mironov muttered. You train the child. Daria cut him off. On command anger. On command submission, on command love for mother. And all of this was financed through the Family Perspective Charitable Foundation. Want me to show you the reports? Mironov stayed silent. The worry showed on his face. Daria straightened. The blood on her lip had dried into a dark crust, but her eyes burned. You, standing here, she waved around the room. You are the support of the Igorov family, their connections, their strength, their wall. And now you are watching it fall. Click. New slide. Charitable foundations used as cash-out machines. Look, the new generation. The future of Russia. Children of the capital. Beautiful names for dirty deeds. Click. Transactions through intermediary companies. The money goes to Estonia, then Latvia, then Zurich. Classic scheme. Nothing original. Senator Pisarev, a heavy-set man with a bulldog face, leaned against a marble column. Judge Pashin, pale as winter snow, lost his usual color. Irina Valerievna's hand trembled. She clutched her throat, struggling to breathe. Her diamond necklace shook with her pulse. Mironov stared into space, his face frozen like a mannequin in an expensive suit. Alexey sank into a chair, hiding his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. He was broken, a puppet. Daria turned to the guests. You've all seen the transfers, 2 million rubles monthly for behavioral support. Anyone care to explain what this money was for? Silence. Then I will explain, Daria continued, her voice clear and precise, like a lawyer in court. I spent 3 years collecting evidence. The materials have been sent to the investigative committee, the financial monitoring service, and the editorial teams of Novaya Gazeta and the new newspaper. The full package: large-scale fraud, tax evasion, abuse of office, and systematic psychological abuse, all to control a capable citizen. Artyom, Alexey's cousin, stepped forward, trying to take control. This is hysteria. She's taking revenge for a failed marriage. Everyone can see she's drunk. She's paranoid. Daria turned to him and smiled calmly, almost kindly. Artem Igorevich, remember the Western tech deal, October 2022? He froze. October 14th, she continued. Translation at 1742 Moscow time. Stroy Invest Plus Company. Remember that one? Of course, he muttered. I registered it 2 days before the tender. Daria spoke softly, like a teacher explaining a simple problem. Insider trading, Article 185, Paragraph 6 of the Criminal Code. Up to 7 years in prison. Artyom turned pale, opened his mouth and closed it. Amount: 347 million rubles, Daria added. The call from your IP address happened at 1658. I have a printout. And, by the way, about charity, 87% of the funds from the Children of Moscow Foundation were transferred to the account of Elena Morozova in Zurich. Morozova is your aunt Irina Valerievna's maiden name. Coincidence? Irina Valerievna changed her tone, soft and maternal. Daria is clearly tired. We've been worried about her mental health. We tried to help her, offered rest. Here are the documents. Daria interrupted her, scrolling on her phone. Video from our bedroom. Yes, the camera you installed as a security system. T-analysis from the housekeeper, Finosapam if anyone's interested, and 6 months of blood tests, signed and stamped by the chief toxicologist at Skliff. A whisper went through the hall. The women exchanged glances. Someone nodded. Someone whispered to a neighbor. Daria turned to Mironov. Pavel Sergeyevich, I'm ready to make a deal. Immunity in exchange for the truth. Tell us everything. Who paid you for what, for how long, and most importantly, what exactly you did to Alexey all these years. Mironov stood like a cornered animal, his gaze darting between Daria and Irina Valerievna. There's a choice, Daria continued, addressing everyone. Cooperate with the investigation, or be summoned as a suspect. Decide quickly. People started stirring, pulling out phones. Someone whispered into a receiver, another typed messages. The Igorov clan was unraveling, through old connections, new agreements, WhatsApp chats. Alexey lifted his head and looked at his wife. Something alive, real, returned to his eyes for the first time in months. How long did you know? He asked quietly. 3 years, Daria replied. Since the day you started recording my calls, not knowing I was already recording yours. He swallowed. I didn't want to. I didn't want to hurt you. I know, Daria's voice softened. You weren't the only victim. That's why I stayed, so that one day you would understand. Son! Irina Valerievna almost screamed. This is nonsense. Tell them. Alexey turned to his mother, pain etched on his face. Do you remember that boarding school? I was 13. You said it was for my own good. Do you remember? Irina Valerievna stayed silent. Mironov, Alexey continued, his voice breaking. He forced me to stay silent. He said I was sick, that my feelings were wrong, that they needed to be corrected. Pills, sessions. I began to forget who I was. I became who you wanted me to be. He looked at his mother. In his eyes, the terror of a child, trapped in a 35-year-old man. You did this to me? He froze, unable to finish. A mechanical sound broke the silence. The elevator doors slid open. 2 men in dark suits entered the hall. They weren't waiters or guests. Daria recognized them immediately. Romanov, tall, with a military posture and a faint smile. 3 years ago, he had been just an operative, listening skeptically to her first testimony. Now he was a lieutenant colonel, a man who believed in schemes and numbers. The second man was younger, with sharp, watchful eyes, the look of an investigator. Both wore formal suits, as always on duty. Romanov approached Irina Valerievna and handed her a document. We have a warrant to seize all digital media and financial documents in your possession, he said. Irina's hand shook as she took the paper. The thin sheet rustled, just ordinary A4, but to her it felt like a tombstone. Her eyes raced along the lines, searching for loopholes. There were none. She looked at Artyom. Her nephew was already retreating toward the exit, his lawyer closing a leather briefcase. The rats were fleeing the ship. Do you know who I am? Irina asked, her voice breaking. Not a threat anymore, a plea. Romanov nodded. We know. That's why we're here. The hall became an anthill. The rustle of silk dresses, the clink of a dropped glass, muffled whispers, panic dressed in expensive outfits. Waiters froze, trays in hand. Should they keep serving? Leave? Someone dropped a napkin. It slid slowly across the parquet. Judge Pashin pressed his phone to his ear. Call a car. Yes, immediately. Doesn't matter where you are, urgently. Senator Pizarrov's wife, a thin blonde in emeralds, grabbed her husband's arm and pulled him toward the exit. Her Hermes bag hugged her chest like a shield. Phones were buzzing nonstop with notifications. The Igorov empire is under investigation. Family Charity Foundation a cover for billion-dollar scams. Psychological manipulation in Moscow's elite circles. Shocking details. Irina Valerievna straightened, trying one last attempt to save face. This is a terrible misunderstanding, she said. Just a family quarrel. Daria has always exaggerated. We have friends who can confirm this. Colonel Diktarev, head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs Department and frequent guest at the Igorovs' house, stepped back. Stone face. All questions through a lawyer. I'm not your man anymore, Irina Valerievna. It had begun, an avalanche of renunciations. The PR manager of the holding, an energetic brunette in a formal suit, was already typing. I'm preparing a press release about contract termination. We are distancing ourselves completely. Old partners deleted numbers from their phones, openly, without shame. The editor of Commerçant called the newsroom. Film a story about the Queen of Charity. Yes, everything. Alexey sat motionless, staring ahead, yet his mind drifted inward. Fragments of memory appeared. Summer in Karelia, age 13, a wooden house by a lake, the smell of pine. Mom said it was for his own good. Health camp. Special. First session with Mironov. Soft voice. Tell me how you feel. And then the cold, icy hands on his temples. To be silent is to be strong. Repeat. Headaches, sharp as needles. Punishment for disagreement, for resisting. The tablets were small and white. Vitamins for the brain, Mom said. Emptiness. Blessed emptiness instead of feelings. Daria approached slowly and stopped a step away from him, unsure who was in front of her, her husband or a puppet. Conflicting feelings waged inside her. He had hit her, but he had been beaten in a different way, methodically, over the years. He had been cruel, but could a broken machine ever be good? She sat down next to him and spoke quietly. The program is ending. You don't have to be their tool anymore. Alexey slowly turned his head. For the first time in many months, his eyes were alive, real. I hurt you, he whispered. He raised his hand slowly, hesitantly, toward her face, to her broken lip, but froze. He couldn't bring himself to touch her. Daria leaned closer. You weren't yourself. It was a programmed response. Your mother gave the command. You did what she made you do. At the other end of the hall, Mironov was shaking in front of an FSB officer. His face was gray as ash. I just followed the method, he muttered. It's scientific. Daria turned back to Alexey. Do you remember how far it went? He pressed his temples. Memories came in waves, a room without windows for concentration, endless repetition of the same phrases. I am Igorov. I am strong. I am cold. Resistance was punished, not physically but chemically, electrically. Neural connections were rewired. They had done this for 23 years. Alexey bent over in pain, as if someone was pulling rusty nails from his brain. Irina's voice trembled with despair. Don't listen to her. Everything we did was for you, for your future. Daria stood up calmly. All sessions are recorded. Irina Valerievna, your instructions to Mironov, what emotions to suppress, what reactions to block. I have the records. The mask finally fell from Irina's face. Gone was the socialite, replaced by a woman losing everything, her face twisted with rage and fear. The Igorov legacy had to be protected, she thought, but Alexey had been weak, soft, incapable of running the empire. Alexey straightened and looked at his mother. My weakness was wanting to live, just live, read books, write music, be with the one I chose. He turned to Daria, pleading with his eyes. At least something between us was real, at least in the beginning. She nodded. Yes. The first year, before the pressure began, you were alive, cheerful. That's why I stayed, to wait for the real you. People in uniform filled the hall. Investigative committee, FSB officers, businesslike, professional. An officer read the arrest warrant to Irina Valerievna. She stood straight, years of training showing, but her fingers trembled. Artyom was already negotiating with a young investigator. Full access to company servers, all passwords, all documents, in exchange for a reduced charge. I'm ready to make a deal, he said. Mironov sat at the table, writing his testimony. His hand shook, letters crooked. He looked at Alexey, not asking for forgiveness, only endless fatigue in his eyes. Daria stood in the middle of the ruined celebration. She could have left. The deed was done. Justice would prevail. But she looked at Alexey. He was like a man whose blindfold had just been removed after years of darkness. He squinted, reached for the light, for a new self or the old, forgotten self. I can help, she said. I have all the materials, triggers, behavioral patterns, impact schemes. This will help your recovery. Alexey looked at her, bewildered. Why? After everything I did, he touched the bruise forming on her cheek. Why do you want to help me? Daria touched her broken lip, winced, then smiled. Because I can tell the difference between those who pull the strings and those being pulled. 6 months later, in a Moscow city courtroom, Daria sat in the back row, watching. Irina Valerievna sat in handcuffs. No makeup, no jewelry. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, gray roots showing where color had been carefully applied before. Her gaze was empty, staring into nowhere. The courtroom was packed. Journalists from RBC and Commerson scribbled in notebooks. Former partners of the Igorovs sat in tight groups, people who had been cheated, forced out, or ruined by the family. Their faces were grim, but there was a hint of satisfaction. Judge Kravtsova, about 50, with a straight back and sharp eyes, reviewed the case files. She had been appointed after Judge Pashin's removal. Every one of his decisions from the past 5 years was under scrutiny. The prosecutor stood and read the indictment in a dry, businesslike voice. Evidence included documents from Daria, testimony from Dr. Mironov, financial audits, and neuropsychological reports. The charges were serious: money laundering, tax evasion, abuse of trust, and, for the first time in Russian history, systematic psychological pressure to control and suppress a person's will. Irina no longer had an army of lawyers. Artyom testified against her for a reduced sentence. Most of the holding's lawyers had fled, some abroad, some to other firms. Only a public defender, a young girl with a worn backpack instead of a briefcase, sat beside her. After a break, Maria Chineva, a forensic auditor from the Central Bureau of Financial Investigations, approached Daria. Short and sharp, in a formal suit, carrying a folder of documents, she said quietly, "We tracked over 38 billion rubles, sent abroad and returned through scams. And you were still careful in your calculations." Daria nodded. The numbers no longer intimidated her. "There's something interesting," Maria continued. "In the old trust charter your husband's grandfather set up in the 90s, there's a clause. If systemic abuse of trust is proven, assets can be redistributed to victims instead of going to the treasury." "Grandfather was wise," Daria said quietly. Alexey added, "He didn't trust anyone, not even his own son." That clause meant the stolen funds could go directly to compensate everyone harmed by the Igorovs' actions. Daria smiled for the first time that day. Justice wasn't just punishment, it was restoration. In the courthouse corridors, Daria met people erased from the family's history for years. Former charity employees fired for disloyalty, partners ruined by corporate takeovers, relatives cut out of wills. One woman stood out, Irina Valerievna, Alexey's cousin, thin, about 30, with a determined look. At 19, I refused to join the family schemes, she said. Irina Valerievna came to me personally. Either you are with us or against us, she said. I chose against. They evicted me from my apartment. It turned out it was registered to a shell company. I was expelled from Moscow State University after a call to the dean. I couldn't even find a job. My former relatives called everywhere. But I survived. I went to St. Petersburg, started over, and now I run my own legal practice. I help the investigation, rebuild the family's internal hierarchy, methods of pressure, and chains of control. At the second meeting, Mironov spoke. Aged and haggard, his voice monotone, robotic, ironically, given his specialty. Mironov talked about mental programming, the instructions he received from Irina Valerievna, and the specific triggers that force behavior, touches, phrases, even smells. Alexey Igorov was one of the first, he said. The experiment began when Alexey was 13. By 18, they had full control over his emotions. Alexey wasn't in the courtroom. He was in a special rehabilitation program at the Institute of Psychiatry. His legal status was unclear, both victim and perpetrator. Daria visited him once a week. He changed, lost weight, looked older, grew quieter. The confident air was gone. I don't know who I am, he said at their last meeting. Even my favorite color, blue, was chosen by them. It inspires trust in business partners. You are free from the program now, Daria said. Asking questions is the first step to freedom. He smiled, uncertain but real, for the first time in years. Daria left her law firm, Mikhailov and Partners. She couldn't continue representing corporations knowing their hidden truths. Instead, she founded the Cognitive Freedom Foundation, a small office on Chisty Prudy, 5 employees, a modest budget but a clear mission: fight psychological abuse, investigate financial manipulation, and protect people from control via drugs or technology. In the first 3 months, the foundation took on 24 cases: former Igorov employees, graduates of elite boarding schools, victims of corporate cults. Daria launched an educational program for judges, psychologists, and lawmakers, and pushed for cognitive violence to become a separate crime in the criminal code. Free will is not philosophy, she said at a conference. It is a basic human right, protected by law. Irina Valerievna was sentenced at the end of November. 28 years in a general prison colony for large-scale fraud, running a criminal organization, and abuse of trust. Daria sat in the back row, focused on new clients. A group of parents had reached out for help against an elite school using manipulative methods. After the session, Alexey approached her. Jeans, a simple shirt, short haircut, no glossy air look, but a clear, steady gaze. The trustees approved the restitution plan, he said. All victims will be compensated, including you. I didn't do it for the money, Daria said. I know, he replied. That's why I'm donating my share to your foundation. It's a way to let go of what was forced on me and support what you're building. They stood outside the court building, not as husband and wife, not as enemies. 2 people who had survived destruction and found themselves. When I finish rehabilitation, I want to help, Alexey said. My experience must mean something. I want to help others. Daria nodded. They parted at the court steps. No kisses, no promises, free. Back at her office, Daria thought, this wasn't just exposing a criminal scheme. It was reclaiming myself, the right to be me, not a tool in someone else's system. New challenges awaited: children in closed boarding schools, business schools run like cults, families using fear and dependence to build power. But now Daria had something Irina Valerievna never had: the legacy of freedom, the right to her own truth, and a future chosen by herself. Months passed, and life slowly settled into a new rhythm. The Cognitive Freedom Foundation grew, taking on more cases, helping victims of psychological manipulation, corporate abuse, and systemic control. Each success was a quiet victory, A person reclaimed, a family freed, a truth revealed. Daria poured herself into the work, but now it was fueled by hope rather than fear. She had turned pain into purpose. Alexey continued his rehabilitation. The boy who had been forced to obey every command, to suppress every feeling, was finally learning to live for himself. Music became his refuge again, as it had once been in childhood. He started writing, composing melodies that reflected emotions he had never allowed himself to feel. Slowly, he began to laugh, sometimes softly, sometimes in bursts of joy that surprised even him. Their bond was no longer tied to marriage or obligation. It was a connection built on shared survival, understanding, and respect. They spoke openly about the past, about the years of manipulation, and about the long road ahead. Trust was rebuilt step by step. He never stopped being grateful for Daria's courage. And she never stopped being patient, knowing that real healing takes time. In court, the Igorov empire continued to crumble. Former employees stepped forward, whistleblowers came forward, and the evidence against Irina Valerievna and her accomplices expanded. The stolen fortunes were partially recovered, redirected to victims and charitable initiatives. People who had once been silenced now had a voice. One evening, Daria walked through the office windows overlooking Chisty Prudy. She watched the city lights shimmer on the water. She thought of all the children in elite schools, the employees trapped in silent corporate oppression, the families who thought fear gave them control. And she knew that she had already begun to change that. She had already set in motion a wave of accountability and protection that would ripple far beyond her own experience. Alexey joined her in the office, holding a small notebook filled with music sheets. He smiled, genuine, real, and handed it to her.
"For the foundation," he said.
"For the people we're helping." His eyes reflected gratitude, a clarity that had been absent for decades. Daria took the notebook and nodded. "It's not just about justice," she said. "It's about freedom. And freedom is something no one can take from you once you know how to claim it." Together, they planned the next steps: workshops, educational programs, public awareness campaigns. Every case they handled became a lesson, every survivor a story of resilience. They celebrated small victories, like a patient finally breaking free from psychological abuse or a whistleblower safely exposing corruption. Each success reminded them why they fought. And yet life was not only about work. They found moments of simple joy: morning coffee by the river, long walks in the park, laughter shared over a trivial joke. Slowly, trust and friendship blossomed into something deeper, unforced, honest. Years later, when Daria looked back on the battle against the Igorov Empire, she didn't see only the cruelty and betrayal. She saw the strength she had discovered within herself, the courage of those who had suffered and survived, and the legacy of freedom she had helped build. The world had changed. Not entirely, but enough. People began to speak up, to challenge the systems that sought to control them. And in that change, Daria felt a quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served, but more importantly, humanity had been restored. As she watched the sun set over Moscow, Daria whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." And for the first time in years, she felt the future was hers to choose, bright and unbroken, a life lived fully on her own terms.